I'm reliving an old memory. 2008, back when gas prices were heading up to like $4 or $5 a gallon. After church one day, when we went out to lunch, my husband and my boys and I, we were sitting there at the table and just casual conversation. I said, I've been thinking with gas prices getting so high, I'm thinking maybe I should get a motorcycle. My husband about dropped his fork. He's like, "What? You on a motorcycle?" Now, mind you, he had motorcycles forever before we met. But anytime we were out and we'd see a motorcycle or more like hear it, I was like, "Oh, those bikers, they're just so obnoxiously loud, especially those Harley people." Boy, did I end up eating my words. So anyways, here we're back at lunch after church. And I said, yeah, I was thinking, maybe I should get a motorcycle to save money on gas going to and from work because I had a 50-mile round trip commute every day. So after my husband stopped laughing, he's like, "You've never ridden a motorcycle. How in the world are you going to learn how to ride a motorcycle?" So I reached into my book bag and I pulled out a flyer. I said, "Well, there's a company that gives lessons, motorcycle lessons. So I could like take this class and it's like Friday night and Saturday and Sunday. And then when I finish the class, I take the test. Boom, I've got my motorcycle license." He just sat there shaking his head. It's like, okay. And of course I had the flyer already and had the price and everything. He's like, "Okay, so let's say you do this. You go and you take this class and you get your motorcycle license. Well, what are you going to ride?" So I reached into my bag and I said, "Well, I found this on the bulletin board at work. What do you think?" It was an ad for a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. This time he about fell out of his chair. He's like, "What?" So I showed him the ad, and it was for an older, it was actually a 1988 Electra Glide Classic, but it was a really good price. So he's like, "Well, that's a pretty good bike if it is what it says it is." So we made arrangements with the guy and met him up at work, and my husband looked it over. He said, "Yeah, this is a good deal. Let's go ahead and get it." So we bought the bike. The next weekend, I took the class. It was actually quite fun. So Friday evening after work, it was all classroom stuff, like learning all the rules and regs, and then Saturday morning, we were actually out on what they call the range, which is basically the parking lot of one of our local community college campuses. So that was my first time actually sitting on a bike, and they showed us how to, all the ins and outs and the safety and how to start it. And then that morning we were actually slowly like walk riding them around the parking lot. Anyways, long story short, it was a really fun weekend, and I took the test and I got my motorcycle license. Well, of course, in the class they teach you on these little 250cc, like little tiny bikes. And I came home and I looked at that motorcycle that we had purchased, and I'm like, "I can't ride that. It's too big. I'll kill myself." So my husband's like, "Okay." Well, so the next Sunday after church, again, we always went out to lunch after church. We were, I guess on our way to or from lunch, we saw this little Harley Sportster in a parking lot in front, like a bank or something. Of course, the bank was closed. So we went over and gave it a quick once over and wrote down the number and called the people and said, "We saw your bike in front of this bank and we're really interested." So we made an arrangement to meet with them. Long story short, we bought the bike. So of course we trailered it. We had a big utility trailer. We trailered it home because of course I'd only ridden a bike for the weekend, and I was like, "I'm not riding it home. I need to practice first." So I've got my motorcycle license, but I'm not really prepared to ride, if you will. Not around here in the northern DC area or the northern Virginia area. So I'm like, my husband says, "Well, I guess I'll have to ride this other Harley." Like, yeah, hard. Well, he didn't have a motorcycle license, sorry. When he moved here from California, he didn't bother renewing it because, I figured my biking days are over. So now we have two motorcycles, one licensed driver, and one who had been riding bikes like for 50 years or so, and he had to go get a learner's permit. So he goes to the DMV and takes the test, and he was required by law to ride for at least 30 days with a permit. But the stipulation was he was only allowed to ride the motorcycle if if there was a licensed motorcycle rider with him. Oh yes, I had great fun with that. I was like, dear, you go out in front of me, so when we would go on these rides, like, so I can observe you and make sure that you're doing it right. I never heard the end of that. So basically, he rode around for a year on that permit until it was about to expire, and then he went took his test and got his license. Well, I rode that little Harley to and from work a lot, and it was actually quite fun. So, for some reason, I was reminded of my motorcycle days. Ended up trading in the Sportster for a Heritage Softail Classic. So a little bigger bike, a little bit more comfortable for the ride to and from work. We took a few small trips, never really anything long. Our intention was to take a nice long bike ride, but it never really happened. And I ended up we hadn't ridden for a couple of years because health issues and whatnot. And anyways, when I needed to figure out a way to buy a van so that we could transport him around, ended up sold my little Saab convertible, sold my motorcycle, sold his pickup truck, and used those proceeds towards buying a decent used minivan, which would be easier for him to get in and out of. This was before he was an amputee, but he was having trouble. So anyways, that van went to good use until we could actually work through the VA to get the wheelchair van that I've showed in a previous video, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, for some reason, that memory came to me today. So I pulled out my old motorcycle jacket and thought I would share it and model it today. So for those of you who are shocked, yes, I was a biker chick for a while. We were even part of a motorcycle ministry and a home church that was all around this motorcycle ministry. And yeah, so that was a portion of my life. I was a Harley biker chick. People are like, oh, do you drive or are you just a passenger? I'm like, no, I can't be a passenger. I'd be a lousy passenger. I'm way too much of a control freak, which is true, sadly. But anyways, I had fun. So there's no real lesson or great takeaway from this, except unbeknownst to many, I was born to be wild, apparently. So I had my few years of wildness, and I hung on to my leather jacket because I just couldn't bear to part with it. Maybe one day, but it's actually quite warm. So when it's really cold, I still wear it. Oh well. So that's it for my crazy story for tonight. Just a little fun. I hope you all have a good night. Take care. God bless.